Amanda.
Hey, Tommy.
I was thinking about going back to college, and I found this one that has some really interesting courses, like remedial chaos theory. Have you ever heard of this place?
I wonder if it's the same one I'm looking into. Is there a study group that we could both join?
Yes, there is. And also their flag looks like an anus for some reason.
Is it Greendale?
From the TV show Community. It sure is.
And that's what we're going to talk about today.
On Can We Talk About?
Well, I'm a peanut bar, and I'm here to say your checks will arrive on another day. Another day, another dime, another rhyme, another dollar. Another stuffed shirt with another white collar. Criminals, Wall Street taking the pie, and all the black man gets is a plate of white lies. Prisons recruiting them, police be shooting them, rap artists looting them, labels all diluting them. Barack Obama is scared of me, cause I don't swallow knowledge and I spit it for free. Let me clear my throat. Ha ha ha. I don't know what that was, I don't know what that was.
Can we talk about Community?
Please, like we were just talking a little bit offline, how much we both love this show, but I feel like I haven't watched it in so long.
I took a break from it. It's really funny. I go through bouts where like I'll binge watch it, and just to really jump right there, I guess, it goes season 1, season 2, season 3, season 5, and then season 6-ish.
Okay.
Which isn't okay. But I'll explain further. But did you watch this show from the inception, or did you pick it up later?
So I did. And oddly enough, and what year did this show start? 2008, 9?
2009.
2009. Okay. And oddly enough, when I did, just for context, I graduated high school in 2005.
Okay.
And when I graduated high school, the way it worked is like I had already had college credits, and then I was working at a job where I was making a lot of money, and I was like, I'm going to hold off going to school. And my mom was sick, so I stayed home to help with my family and all this other stuff. Didn't go to my dream school, kept holding it off. And then I went back to community college, and I was years older than the kids that were starting, because I was just like, I miss school. I miss learning. I love being in school. And I just started to take classes. And when this show came out, I was like, oh my God, it's my life. It's my life. This is me.
Did you have a study group? Did you meet people?
You know, I did have in my speech class, oddly enough. Do you remember when you had to take like that public speaking class? Everyone had to take their freshman year, and I took my public speaking class and made some friends, made some solid friends that I'm still friendly with. I was like, but it was like me and 4 dudes. So I don't know. I don't know what I was after there, but.
Yeah, I mean, so for those that don't know, and this is where it gets kind of interesting to me, this is easily one of the greatest shows of all time for many reasons. I remember thinking, like, you know, I would every once in a while I come up with like, oh, you know, what if you had a TV show about this, or coming up with concepts for like TV shows in your head. I hope normal people do that, but that's what I do a lot. And I get angry sometimes because I think of like, this show was so meta and funny, and the way it was written, like everything was so perfect, and like the sort of commentary on other TV shows, like a TV show sort of commentating on other TV shows, was so original at the time, especially, that I was angry at it. And nowadays,
at it because it was so good.
Yes, because it's almost like they did it and you can't undo it, and like no one can ever do that again without being pointed at.
Absolutely.
Like you're just ripping off Community.
100% understood.
And Dan Harmon now is probably way more well known for Rick and Morty than he is for this show at this point, which makes me upset, because I'm like, this show struggled to make it to season 6, but it deserved more.
I feel like this is one of those shows that's going to have its resurgence the same way that some of the shows we've already talked about, but like Parks and Rec kind of came back around a few years ago, where it had died off and people didn't watch it, and it came back around. And I have a feeling Community is going to do that, because the people our age that have watched Community, it's a comfort show. It's just a straight up comfort show. And I agree with you on everything you said. One thing that I always thought when watching this is just like, I don't understand how somebody can come up with this, how it's all working.
Yeah.
Because if you were to explain to someone what the show's premise is and say, well, sometimes in episodes it randomly goes to a comic strip where they act out, you know, like they're really pissed at each other playing foosball. Now it's in a comic strip and they're arguing with each other. People would be like, that sounds so stupid.
Yeah.
But when you're watching it, it's like, how are they doing this? Not only how are they doing this, but how are they pulling this off so well? They're not just pulling it off. They're fucking killing it.
Yeah.
And that's how I would always feel watching it.
The fact that it can go to different places and it still stays within the universe of itself. I went back and watched it. I've watched it so many times, and I've talked about on this podcast a few times about how like sometimes shows take their time to find themselves, right? Like almost famously, people are like, skip the first season of Parks and Rec.
Yes.
A show we haven't done yet, but I know everyone tells me about and we will eventually do is Schitt's Creek, where people are like, just power through the first season. It gets better. But you almost have to like power through it. And we talked about how Arrested Development, they almost famously were shot out of the cannon and were good from the first episode. Community starts out really strong, but it devolves, if you will, or evolves, depending on how you want to look at it, into itself. I want to say it's by like the 8th episode of the first season. And I listened to the commentary on the show and everything, and there was an episode, and I think it's the one, and I'm trying to figure out which one it is. But for the cast, for everybody, it was the episode in the first season where it turns into like a Goodfellas parody, which is the one that clicked for a lot of people. Like, oh, this is a whole different show.
It's
like,
a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing something way different. And I'm trying to see if I can find the name of the episode. I want to say like it was like, Contemporary American Poultry, 21st episode of the first season. Everything before that is still staying on like they're a study group, blah, blah, blah. And then it devolves into like, now we're doing parodies. And then 2 episodes after that is Modern Warfare. So the show quickly becomes itself in the first season, but out of like a 25 episode first season, takes about 20 episodes before they're like, all right, like this is not what you expect. Like we're going to dive full into it and be wacky and weird.
Completely fair. And I feel like by that time, everybody's hooked.
Yeah.
Like you're so attached to the characters and the writing's fantastic. The comedy and just everything about them. You're so attached to them. By the time it gets weird, you're so into it that the weird is like that much better. It's the best kind of weird. And
it's unique and it's in of itself. Like the show, like everybody else now, I keep finding TV shows and movies through TikTok because there's like, someone posts a clip from a show. I'm like, oh, what is this movie? What is this show? And there was this clip someone posted like, oh, if you liked Parks and Rec, you'll love this show. And I don't even know what the show was called. It was like, oh, if you liked Office Space, you'll love this show. And I think it's literally called Corporate or something like that. But anyway, I'm just watching the scene and I'm like, everyone's acting over the top. Everyone's in on the joke. Is it written,
Workaholics?
No, it's not Workaholics. It's
I was gonna say I love that.
It's
show.
something obscure. I think it's called Corporate.
Okay.
But the thing is, like, the way everyone's acting, they're like over the top. They're almost mimicking a scene from the movie Office Space with like the consultants there. But the acting is over the top. The comedy is over the top, where it's just like this. You're too indulgent almost. Whereas Community, like what made the humor work is the characters. Like I think the balance between Jeff and Annie, and Abed and Troy, the way the characters were, they stayed true to life. There was a little bit of chaos, and then it eventually devolved, and they just sort of let go a little bit as it kept going.
Yeah. That's fair. I feel like this, to me, was like a combination of the same way I felt about The Office or Parks and Rec, like that kind of group, drama, comedy vibe. But then you throw in like an Always Sunny, where it's a little bit ridiculous, but the ridiculousness fits the comedy so perfectly that it's not, I don't feel embarrassed watching it. I'm like on the weirdness.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A good example, and you mentioned The Office. Some of the later seasons, and I've seen people especially on like Reddit, mention this in places of like, the show gets too wacky, where it's just like, it starts off as being a workplace comedy, and then it like you jump ahead a few seasons, especially after Michael left, and it's like he's firing a gun in the office, and this like it's like, no, this is beyond reality now. We've escaped reality, but you're still trying to be a show that's a workplace comedy. It's too unrealistic at this point. We've suspended belief way too much. With Community, like it gets wacky and weird, but they own it. right? Like the first season, they're literally running around the school having the paintball battle as the not even the season finale, by the way, just to point that out. That is episode 23 of 25 from the first season.
Can we just talk about that for a minute? Back when shows had 20 plus episodes per season.
I know.
Now if we get 10 episodes, we're like, oh, this is a long season.
I know. Everything is like, oh, 12 episodes, it's over already. Like, okay, well, guess we'll wait till next year. I mean, you know what's frustrating about that too? There's so many shows, like we talked about Arrested Development on of course, Arrested Development episode. But we talked about how like they brought it back. They waited a couple of years and everyone's older and they had work done or they're just kind of slower.
Yeah.
When you're pumping out 25 episodes a season, right?
Yeah.
It's jam-packed in there and you're getting all the episodes done. And there's a lot of room for, now we have this catalog of content that's going to live on for years. When you're doing 12 episodes a season and there's a year or two between seasons, by season 3, everyone's like 6 years older, So I think it is depressing that the world of 22 episode seasons as being the norm is gone and way behind us now.
I also think, and I think that's because I watch New Girl all the damn time. Those episodes are short. They're like 25 to 26, 27 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So very digestible at 20 plus episodes.
Yeah.
And I get it. And maybe you're not going to do 25-hour long episodes per season. But I do feel like there's so much storyline missing now. And I feel like shows like this that just like we're able to pack so much into a season. You're like, oh, it's only 6 seasons long. Yeah. 6 seasons in a movie, but like it's only 6 seasons long. And you're kind of like, oh, that's it. And then you look and you're like, oh my God, this is like 10 times the amount of episodes as every new show that's come out. Yeah.
And funny enough too, and I just pulled it up randomly because I'm like, what's something like produced by NBC or someone that's like new? And the one I keep hearing about is Poker Face, right? That's the one with
Natasha.
Leah. And that is and I guess, are they hour-long episodes? Maybe they're hour-long episodes. 10 episodes. That's it. That's all they get.
I feel like every good show is like 8 episodes, 10 episodes, 11. If you get 12, like I don't remember what Game of Thrones was, but I just remember being like, oh my God. Maybe because we've become such a bingeable society and this is such a bingeable show. And it makes it so much more enjoyable to binge because it is so long. You can watch, 5 episodes in a sitting and you're like, I just watched 5 episodes of a show I love. Where you're not, waiting a full week to find out what happens.
Well, and by the way, just as a good example, Severance, another show we've talked about here. Yeah, 9 episodes. That's it. We only had 9 episodes, which I think what's bonkers to me in the world and the economics of TV today. We're going way off topic, by the way. We'll get back.
We really are. Well, it's the show. It's what we talk about.
In the economics of the TV world, to your point, everyone is binging stuff now. That's how everyone is consuming this content. And for a world where they're consuming content in bulk and binging, you want a show that has 25 episodes in a season or has a catalog of, by season 2, we're almost at just shy of 50 episodes at that point.
It's insane.
Right?
That's a whole series.
Yeah. In 2 years, you have 50 episodes. And there are some shows that are airing now, like The Mandalorian hasn't even come close to 25 total episodes at this point. So, but I'll get back on track and say, number one, the show, the talent that's behind it, it's the same thing that when we talked about a lot of parallels between like this and like Arrested Development, there was talent there. And ironically enough, there's the common thread is Anthony and Joe Russo.
Yeah.
They did Arrested Development, but they also did Community, and they were like in Community from day one. Justin Lin, who famously like directed a bunch of Fast and Furious movies, was directed episodes of this. And I want to say it was Justin Lin directing Modern Warfare that got him
so good
considered for that. So yeah, it's just great. Do you have a favorite episode from the first season?
From the first season? I don't remember.
Yeah.
We actually just talked about this offline. So let me backtrack because I haven't watched it in so long from beginning to end. What keeps happening for me, the way I come back to this show is I'll watch just like an episode. A clip will pop up. I'm like, oh, that was a good episode. And I'll watch like clips of it on YouTube or something. Like, it's not like the way I am with New Girl where I just keep rewatching the show, which I should because I feel like I'm missing so much of the genius of the show. So I don't know if I have a favorite first season episode.
Yeah. Well, I also realized before we even get into that and before I put you on the spot there, I realized we just sort of jumped right into it and assumed like, yeah, okay, everyone loves the show, right?
Everyone knows what Community is.
So you have Joel McHale, who at that point was coming off of doing The Soup on
the Soup?
E!
Yeah.
That was pretty much what he's known for. Side note, I met the guy in person years ago and through some, back of Hollywood stuff. Because when I met him, I was just like, I don't understand why this guy is not more famous than he is. He was really funny.
Was he nice?
He was super nice. I love, yeah. Joel McHale,
I thought you were going to tell me
nice
he's
guy.
an asshole, and I was going to be so sad.
No. There's this one awkward picture of him in like a pea coat with his arm around me, towering over me. I'm 5'7". I'm not, I'm average height, we'll call it, please. But I'm 5'7", and he was towering over me. He's a very tall man.
He's a tall man. He's a tall drink of water.
But he sort of plays a lovable version of the character he kind of plays in pretty much everything, which is just this, I don't know how would you describe him in this from a woman's point of view, if you will.
Well,
I feel like he's very charming.
He is very charming, but okay, so he is the everyone's going to fall for him guy. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh God, he could fuck anything he wants to. But at the same time, I think maybe I should say the first season, right? So you're like, oh, look at Joel McHale. He's very attractive. He's doing this role very well. Look at him go. He's doing great. A little bit of an asshole. Okay. Touch of a dick. Oh, okay. He just keeps getting worse. Bit of a misogynist. Okay, we're going to keep going with that.
Yeah.
But then as his character develops, he becomes everything you don't think he is. And I thought I was going to grow to really hate him, the way that everybody, the first season really set me up to be like, oh, this guy's going to be the fucking dick of the show. And don't get me wrong. He has his diva moments where you're like, ew, what a little bitch.
Yeah.
But I also feel like he's really endearing and he comes around and he's like, by the end of the show, he's very well championed, I'll say.
Yeah, absolutely. He starts off and it's like, here's a guy who's narcissistic and he's constantly sarcastic, doesn't take anything seriously. And for those that don't know, because I feel like we should at least mention it, the premise of the show is Joel McHale is Jeff Winger. He's a former lawyer, because he was caught with
one
a
of my favorite lines.
I got a degree from Columbia and now I need one from America.
I need one from America.
So he enrolls in community college to get a degree so he can go back to being a lawyer. So the setup of the entire series is he is there to try to quickly get through however he can, and of course cutting corners wherever he can in getting his degree so he can become a lawyer again, because that's his life and that's what he's been doing for however many years. But to your point, like underneath it all, like that's how it starts. And as I said the line, which sounded bad in general, of like, what's the woman's point of view on Joel McHale in this episode, is the thing with that is I think he's sort of starts off as written as like what a guy's version of the ideal man is, right? It's this like sarcastic, funny, and ironically enough, he's sort of written as whatever character Chevy Chase played in pretty much everything back in the 80s, which we'll get to him in a couple minutes. Anyway, so there's him, and then there's Jillian Jacobs. I've also met her. I'm not going to throw that in there, but like as I'm reading this, I'm like, I got to check off my list of all the celebrities from the show I have met.
I love her so much.
I love her too.
Her show Love on Netflix was chef's kiss.
I heard really good things about that show too, and I haven't watched
that show.
I got to go back and try it. But what I was going to say too is what I'll give her a lot of credit for is, and again, this is the way this, I feel like Dan Harmon, and I think he's admitted this too, is he sort of set it up as like, oh, here's, our version of Friends, but at college kind of thing. And then it very quickly deviates from that plan of like
nothing like that. Maybe the first 2 episodes you might get that vibe, but not after that.
Yeah. It's set up where it's going to be like, oh, this is Joel McHale's character and Jillian Jacobs' character, which is Britta Perry. And they're going to be the will they, won't they for the entire series. And they sort of play with that a little bit, but not in like what you expect, or not playing into like, this is the same time The Office is airing and everyone's like, oh, Pam and Jim, right? And they're just like, we don't want to do that here.
I know. I feel like it's more Jeff and everybody. Jeff could just get with everybody, because then there's a little Jeff and Allison. Like you touch with danger all the way down the line with him.
Yeah, and eventually they do an episode where they touch on that and about like where like Shirley, who's Yvette Nicole Brown, and I'm jumping around now, but she's like, well, why not me and Jeff? Like we're the same age, but obviously they look very different. And anyway, so going back, I'll do Shirley. Yvette Nicole Brown plays Shirley, who, by the way, disappears, I think, after season 5, I want to say.
4 or 5, yeah, to take care of her father. He was dying, yeah.
Yeah, well, what's funny, too, is they play that up in the show. There's like they do like a one-off with her, I think, in season 6. But she plays the devout Christian divorced mother who's
She's
going
incredible.
back to school. Yeah. Danny Pudi, who plays Abed, who is, in my opinion, more of the central character as it goes than Joel McHale is.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah,
but you don't expect it. It becomes the Abed show. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who is addicted to television. And it's kind of funny, too, because I think Dan Harmon has mentioned, like, all of these characters, while sort of based on his experience, are all different versions of either people around him or, like, separate versions of his own personality. So he's
this
sort of like
show
across.
Is based off of that, right? Like his own community college experience.
Yeah, he had a study group.
This is so incredible.
Yeah. And then you have Allison Brie, who, oh man, I had a thing for Allison Brie. I mean, who didn't? Who plays Annie Edison, the overachiever, formerly addicted to Adderall back in high school, where she went with Troy Barnes, which is Donald Glover, who I have a really funny story about.
Okay. Love that.
Who was the former high school quarterback. But it's really funny, too. Again, these are all so cliche. And knowing that from like the brain of Dan Harmon, it's just like, yeah, we're going to quickly toss that aside. Like we're going to like evolve these characters away from those caricatures. And then Chevy Chase, who plays Pierce Hawthorne, who was very problematic behind the scenes.
Oh, boy.
And then starting over the first season, and not meant to be like someone to stick around, but this is one of those things where like, same thing with The Office, where Ed Helms was like just supposed to be like a one-off character. Yeah. And then the Hangover happened. Everyone's like, oh, like the NBC executives are like, we got to lock this guy in, bring him, keep him on the show. Same thing with this show, whereas Ken Jeong did The Hangover, and they're like, oh, that's the Asian guy who shows his penis in the movie. Everyone the kids love him. Keep him around. And so he gets locked in for the rest of the entire series.
Wait, I might have an answer to your other question. Season 1, is that where he like screams at everyone in the classroom and is like, why am I a Spanish teacher? Because I'm a fucking Spanish genius. Is that when he like screams at everyone? Because that episode's incredible. It's like the Spanish 101 class.
He's all up in your he does it so well. Yeah. There's an entire rant where he's just walking around the class shouting at people in Spanish,
it's
in English.
So good.
And the fact that he's just like, I will say, I pretty much like everyone involved in this show, with one exception, and I'll get to him in a second, is sort of down
other than Chevy Chase?
Other than Chevy Chase.
Okay.
Is just down to have fun. They're playful with their characters. I mean, especially Jillian Jacobs, who just like throws her body like physically and mentally, like just, she is the butt of the joke constantly. Like she starts off as being like, oh, this is the Rachel of this show, a la Friends. And it's like, no. She is not. She is I don't know. There's no other character to compare her to. She is the piece of shit they step on constantly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll get to him in a second, but Jim Rash, who plays Dean
Craig.
Dean Craig or Dean Pelton. He was only supposed to be on one episode, by the way. He was only supposed to be on the pilot, and then they brought him back, and then he has a thing with Dalmatians through the first season.
I love him. I was saying offline that payday rap, is probably one of my favorite television moments.
Which, we know what's funny about that? You know what's great about that? That is season 6.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. That is season 6.
That feels like so early. Doesn't it feel like such an early?
Now you're gaslighting me. I got to check this. No, you know what? I apologize. That was season 5, but that was late in the series.
Not much better.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Not much better.
No. Well, and I say that too because like the show obviously went through some things. Before Chevy Chase deserves a quick thing by himself, but before I get there, for context, because this relates, the show went on for 6 seasons, 5 of which were on NBC. The 6th season aired on everyone's favorite platform. It's not Netflix, not Disney Plus, but Yahoo Screen. We all subscribe to Yahoo Screen, of course.
Every day. I don't know how I'd live without it. Yeah.
All my favorite TV shows are on Yahoo Screen. So what happened was, I'll get back to that because there's a whole story in of itself for that too. But somewhere around season 3, I think it might have even been the rap party. Chevy Chase had a interesting back and forth. He didn't get the show. And he was also used to being the center of attention pretty much always. And so, you know, he didn't understand the humor of the show. He didn't understand how it was written. He didn't think the jokes were funny. And so he would constantly bicker with Dan Harmon, passive aggressively. And then he would also try to show up everybody else. Now, ironically enough, Donald Glover, who through outtakes and the show itself, because a lot of stuff that he had improv'd, especially in like the tags at the end of the show, like the Spanish rap he does and things like that, that's him, right? This is a kid who came from like, you know, improv. He came from, he was a writer on 30 Rock. He got a lot of attention because he was funny. And a lot of it, like the actors hung around with him. They were all friends. Chevy Chase the older guy used to being the center of attention, used to being like the focus, lashed out a lot. He dropped the N-bomb a few times on set, which obviously alienated a few of his black co-stars. Yeah. So there was a lot of problems with Chevy Chase in general. What it cultivates in is he leaves Dan Harmon a scathing voicemail about how the show's not funny. He's a piece of shit, all this other stuff. Well, Dan decides to play it at the rap party to the cast and crew with Chevy not there. On the mic. And then that audio then gets further leaked out. And then NBC and Sony, who produces the show, decided we're going to cut ties with Dan Harmon. And so for season 4, they bring in some new showrunners who, by the way, and talking about like how long the season were, season 4 was only 13 episodes, right? Which is maybe a good thing.
Yeah.
Moses Port and David Guara, I can't pronounce his last name, but Moses Port is probably like the more well-known name in that bunch. These guys who had very little experience show running, and the show that they worked on prior was this show called Aliens in America, which is one of the most baffling things I've ever seen make it to air on any network. I can't even describe it without explaining that. Like, this was a show that ran very quickly, was canceled very quickly, ran on the CW, and it was supposed to be about a foreign exchange student who came to America, an Indian foreign exchange student. And it sort of played up to like all the weird, crazy stereotypes. Like, it's an Indian guy. Oh no, people thinks he's a terrorist. Like, this is a show that ran on the CW. It's bonkers. It's doesn't make any sense. I can't believe this actually made it to air. But regardless, NBC, Sony tap these guys to run the show. They take the show in a very odd direction with some weird episodes and weird character developments that they sort of, when that season ends, working with Dan Harmon, realize, okay, we can bring Dan Harmon back because this show is not what it used to be, and it's falling apart. So the show does come back for a 5th season. At that point, Dan Harmon comes back. Those two guys are out. And then at that point, Dan Harmon continues on, and that chugs along for a single season, 13 episodes at NBC. And then NBC decides not to renew it. But you know who has money to pay for a 6th season? Yahoo. Remember them?
So insane.
And so for context, to give them a little credit, Yahoo was trying to launch what they call an ad-supported VOD service. So like Netflix, but with ads. And so their concept was, let's bring on a big TV show that everyone knows. Just like Netflix did with Arrested Development, Yahoo tried to do with Community. But again, Yahoo had no concept of what a TV show costs or how it works or, you know, any of that stuff. So they let Dan Harmon be Dan Harmon. I will say, and this is probably the most important part, I'll give Dan Harmon a lot of credit because I think we talked about on the Arrested Development episode about how the creator there sort of went off the deep end and just like, oh, I can make episodes 40 minutes long and let a joke just run on until it's a beaten dead horse. They did not do that. I will give them credit. The season 6 episodes are concise. It's clear they don't have as much money as they used to, but the show is still predominantly tight. It's still well produced. The episodes are not overly done. I think that was also part of the deal with Sony of like, they'll do it on Yahoo Screen, but like it's still going to be something that's shopped as a syndication show for broadcast. So they want to still keep the episodes at 22 minutes and things. So maybe they still had those barriers in place to keep them on track. But season 6, while it does look a little, and what does hurt a little bit is season 6 opens up and there's a lot of CGI in the beginning. Like there's a gag there. I don't want to ruin it, but they use a lot of CGI and they don't have the NBC money anymore. So
okay,
it's a little different. But compare that to, I think it might have even been season 1, 2, maybe it was season 2, where they had the season 2 episode Epidemiology. It's season 2 episode 6, where Dan Harmon paid out of pocket to pay for the sync licenses for all the ABBA music in that episode.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me? I did not know that.
Yeah. He like NBC's like, you only have this budget. That's it. And he was like, no, I need this. And then paid out of pocket to pay for the licensing get all the ABBA music in that episode. Yeah.
What a little badass. So, I love that. That's a great fun fact. Fun fact.
Yeah. There was a few times, and I think he covers this in a few different places. I know at least from like the commentary I listened to, where Dan Harmon paid out of his own pocket to have stuff done. I think maybe even the Christmas episode where it was all claymation, I think he also paid out of pocket for that, if I'm not mistaken. Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas, which by the way is season 2. Like that's what I'm saying. Like you think about like how shows like go way off the deep end or like really own themselves and who they are. I mean, this show, again, season 1 has a lot of stuff like Modern Warfare or Contemporary American Poultry, which is one of the best ones. But yeah, anyway, so that's my synopsis of that. And a little bit of Chevy Chase in there too.
Oh, God. Do you have a favorite episode of the show?
Yeah, it's funny. Even in prep for this, I actually went back and I was like, oh, what episode do I like? What are some of my favorites? Funny enough, I think the show hit its stride in season 2. I think that's where it was the most playful and the most fun. One of my favorites is Basic Rocket Science, which I just watched just before we record this, which is, and again, I got to give them credit, the product integration with KFC. Like KFC's like, we want to do product integration. They're like, we're going to make a KFC spaceship and really integrate like the way they messed around with doing product integration instead of like literally just like showing the cast all sitting there eating at a KFC for like a scene is so, I love that. I love, and I again, going back, a lot of this relates to our conversation around Arrested Development, where I was saying, sometimes I feel like you need barriers for creativity. Sometimes it's like, all right, you have a TV show. It's all based in one room. They can't leave the room for the episode. Okay, now write that episode. And I feel like when you're caught within those bounds and trying to be creative, you get more creativity out of that. Whereas like with them, like KFC wants to do a product integration, figure out an interesting way to do product integration with KFC for this episode. And what do they come up with? There's a spaceship, Colonel Sanders, like all this other stuff. Like it's all in there. And they do the same thing a couple seasons later with Honda, which I think was maybe also during the Yahoo Screen season.
I think that's probably one of the reasons I love the show. While it was, people be like, oh, it's too weird for me. I've gotten that so many times. Yeah. I'm like, you don't watch Community? I fucking love that show. And they're like, it gets so weird. Yeah. But to me, yes, there are obviously it gets weird. Yeah. We've already spoken about that. Yeah. But they took so many things that were relevantly to happening in the outside world and brought it into their world. Like the whole Cougar Town thing with Abed. And then he's in an episode of Cougar Town. Like he's in the background of an episode of Cougar Town.
One of my favorites.
Remember, and it was like a perfect that is
Yeah.
probably the least likely character to show up in Cougar Town. And the way that, like
Yeah.
you said, they just did so many crossover things. They made the outside world so relevant in their show. It didn't feel like there was a fake world built around their show. It's like they were part of your world. Like this could be happening at your community college.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, even
I
funnier
loved
about that too, there's a mention on Community about how Abed went to go visit the set of Cougar Town because he's obsessed with that show.
Yeah.
And then he's actually on that show, just in the background.
He's on it.
Sitting at another table and then randomly runs away. And then we get the context of what actually happened in the episode of Community. And then separately during one of the, I think it was in the second season, one of the paintball episodes, Dan Bird and Busy Phillips are just like in the crowd.
In season 2 in the finale. Yeah.
They're just in the crowd cheering. Yay.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. The Leonard Likes Pizza YouTube channel, it exists. It's real. It's with the spelling mistake and everything. It's real.
And funnier to me, and this is where it becomes like a little bit punk rock, is while this show is airing simultaneously, the biggest hit show on network TV is Glee. And not only that, they were at the soundstage next door to Glee, and they take so many swipes at Glee. Constantly. Just taking swipes.
I know, and I
Glee.
love Glee. I don't care. You can shit on me all day, Tom. I know that you watch a screener for it and you're like, oh, it's going to be a good show. And then it got Amanda and I fucking love Glee.
You're allowed to love Glee. I'm okay with that.
Thank you.
But
Thank you so much.
Do you still appreciate the swipes at Glee that the show takes?
Abso-fucking-lutely. Because here I am 35 years old where I'll still rewatch Glee and be like, this is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed. But I'm there. I'm in.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? So I mentioned to you too, I don't know if I said it during this podcast, but when I watch the show, I do seasons 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. I skip over 4. I can't watch it. But it is a testament to how the characters are written in a way where even at their faults, they're still lovable, but they stay true to who they are, and they evolve, but they evolve gently. And in season 4, what was so whiplashy about the characters, like they were just doing stuff that it's like, the characters didn't do this. This isn't how the characters would evolve. We already know them for 3 seasons. And then it sort of hits a reset button in season 5. But it goes to show you how delicate the writers and Dan Harmon and Megan Gans, by the way, who wrote so many episodes of the show, who I'm excited now that people generally know who Megan Gans is from the Always Sunny podcast. For context, Megan Gans was a writer on Community. She went on to become a writer on It's Always Sunny. And if anyone watches the Always Sunny podcast or sees clips from it, she is the producer in the room with them during the podcast. So she's getting her comeuppance. People understand she's a household name now because apparently she's on camera. Never done that before. But she has written so many episodes of the show and stayed true to who these people are. And I think even she admitted that some like the stuff that happened during season 4 was like out of her control. But yeah, I mean, I love the way the show's written. It's so close to my heart.
I agree.
And to answer your question, because I never actually answered it, my favorite episode is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, that's funny. I rewatched that because was it our 2023 movie episode when we talked about Dungeons and Dragons? And you're like, oh, it was a Community episode. Watched it, made me like want to play it. Yeah. Okay, so I rewatched it after we did that, and I was like, I get it now. I really get it. Mine is Remedial Chaos Theory, but that's my personal favorite episode.
Yeah.
For many reasons. I like how weird it gets. I just love the different universes and timelines that they all go down. I just love that. But it's funny because that's not the episode I would recommend someone to watch to get them into the show. You know how you have that one episode that you're like, watch this episode, you'll love it. I feel like that one might be too far into the weird realm. Like I need something softer, a little bit softer to get them to be like accepting the weirdness of this episode.
Yeah. Well, also if you send them down that, like you're spending a lot of time with the characters doing the same thing over and over again. So they probably really have to enjoy.
Yeah.
That's a good question though. What is your like recommendation episode then?
Now I have to think about it. One of the ones that makes me giggle so much because the episode where Annie uses chloroform on the janitor. What episode is that?
Oh, what episode is that?
I laugh so hard at that episode. It is just a perfect example of like all of the characters and their hilarity. And oh God, what episode is that? That is one of my favorite episodes.
I know what it is. I already have it. It's Accounting for
ahead.
Lawyers.
Oh my God, it's so good. That's season 1 or 2?
Season 2, episode 2.
Okay, yeah. That's one of my favorite ones. When she uses chloroform with the janitors. So good. It's so fucking funny. That's one of my favorites.
And what's funny about that episode, too, is you also get Rob Corddry, who pops up a few times through the series as just this asshole lawyer who I used to work with, Joel McHale's character. And Drew Carey pops up as like a likable person with a hole in his hand for reasons.
The cameos on this show are fucking insane. Like,
yeah,
if you were to type in the cast list, which I did before we started recording, the people that pop up are insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've got Fred Willard, which oddly enough, Fred Willard and Patrick Stewart were in line to play Pierce's part. Did you know that?
Well, I knew about Fred Willard because even in I think it's actually season 4, which is frustrating.
When he comes, yeah.
He pops up as like they're doing like Abed is I don't know what storyline they tried to come up with that was actually happening, but it was off character for Abed. But yeah, he like recast Chevy Chase and instead cast Fred Willard in that in that role of Pierce.
They really wanted Patrick Stewart, which I think I could see Patrick Stewart, but he can do anything. I'm convinced of it. But Fred Willard is I don't know if you watch Modern Family, but he plays Phil Dunphy's dad. I just love Fred Willard. I'm a big Christopher Guest fan, and I just love. Yeah, he's a weirdo.
Oh, I
love
love Fred Willard. Are you kidding me? And R.I.P. Fred Willard. And then, have you watched I Think You Should Leave yet?
No, not yet. It's my next show to watch. Okay.
He pops up on there as well. So just to help set it up for you as well.
Wonderful. But there's like, this is a star-studded cameo. You've got like Andy Dick, Jack Black, Malcolm Lamar Warner. You've got LeVar Burton. Yeah. Reading Rainbow. Nick Kroll, Randall Park, Kamal Nanjiani.
Yeah.
So many people. Tig Notaro. I fucking love Tig Notaro. Doesn't she play like a disgruntled bartender? Or
I'm trying to remember.
She's definitely a bartender in an episode. Hold on.
Yes, you're right. No, she is a bartender.
She is, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. I completely forgot about that.
Oh, and John Oliver. We haven't talked about John Oliver being on this show.
John Oliver is like in a few seasons, but randomly like disappears for like a full season, comes back for a season. John Oliver, he plays a drunken college professor who's problematic, but it's John Oliver, and he's John Oliver. And swarmy. I love John Oliver.
And Jonathan Banks, who is from Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul, and
which I did not realize. I truly did not realize until I rewatched the Payday episode. I was like, oh my God, how did I not realize this?
Well, I will say too, I think what's great about the way Dan Harmon writes these characters too is like the clashing between like Joel McHale's character and Chevy Chase's character becomes a thing because that's what's happening behind the scenes, right? Or like the evolution of
for sure.
The evolution of Donald Glover's character comes from who he is behind the scenes, where he's just like, this is who people think you are versus like, this is who you really are. And he kind of comes out and becomes himself in the show, right? He starts off as, I'm a former high school quarterback. And they unzip that real quick and let him become just goofy and fun and be like, I just want to wear pajamas and play pretend with Abed and be silly. Build a pillow fort. So I love that about this show is that they let the characters become who they should be or want to be. And it's funny too, because like even with Allison Brie's character, they constantly play up what's the line? Annie's kind of young, but we try not to sexualize her. Is that the line that he whispers over to Jack Black at some point? And it's funny because they obviously like Allison Brie is a very sexual human being. If you ever watch any of the behind the scenes and stuff, and I think she actually commented on this recently on a different podcast about in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons episode, like her explanation, which is muted. And you just see her describing her character and what they do and how she pleasures the maiden in the village.
So good.
I love it. I can listen to Allison Brie do that all day. I'm okay with that. That's what I love about the show too, is it's not forcing you to believe these characters are different people or the act. I don't know. It meshes too much. It becomes meta in of itself of like Chevy Chase is an asshole. So they started writing Chevy Chase's character as an asshole.
As an asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, when he dies, he literally fucking leaves everyone in his will a canister of his sperm.
Yeah. But we have to mention that too, is during the pandemic, they did a celebrity reading, like virtual table read of that episode with
Pedro Pascal.
Pedro Pascal, who is one of the characters in the show.
Daddy Pedro Pascal. Say it right here.
Who burst out laughing way too, like could not control himself reading, and now here's some sperm in the episode. So.
And now here's some sperm.
And here's some sperm.
And here's your obligatory sperm.
But what I love about it too is Jim Rash, Dean, and they go off the deep end with him and let him just like do all kinds of wacky things and be a funny character. But season 1 starts so subtly of him watching a video of this guy in a Dalmatian costume. And one of my favorite quotes is, "I hope this doesn't awaken something in me." And then by the last episode of the season, he literally hired 2 people dressed up as Dalmatians to be his date for the dance, which I forget what the dance was in the last episode. But I love that. Like the show just devolves into silly and then just becomes what it decides it wants to be. And then just says, this is who we are. Like it waves its pride flag, if you will. Is that a fair way to describe it? Maybe
it does. And as silly as it is, some of like the most beautiful lines I've heard in television have been in this show. Like in the episode, my favorite episode, in Chaos there's like a beautiful line that Abed says about chaos. And I saw in TikTok, which reminded me of it the other day, some girl has it tattooed on her arm.
What? Wait, what's the quote?
Chaos already dominates enough of our lives. The universe is an endless, raging sea of randomness. Our job isn't to fight it, but to weather it together on the raft of life. It's a beautiful quote. Abed.
What is that from?
I think that's from the Chaos Theory episode.
Oh, is it? Wow.
Yeah.
I love this. This show is so great. If you're listening to this and you haven't watched the show, I mean, nothing's spoiled or anything. Go watch it. It's hilarious. It gets so meta and fun. Skip season 4, of course. But also, I got to give the show so much credit because I still go back sometimes and I'm like, oh, that's the reference. Like, I mean, clearly the episode I mentioned too as being one of my favorites, Basic Rocket Science. Like the show opens with someone running down the hallway and then like them, opening the door and they're like, City College has a rocket. Like it's all a reference to the movie like Apollo 13.
Yeah.
Right. Or like
I have to rewatch it because I think I missed a lot. I think I missed a lot of references.
Yeah. But I mean, it's that, it's the Goodfellas references, all that stuff. And it's always silly, right? Like it's not, like their Goodfellas reference episode or it's not even a parody. It's an homage. I think that's the one, the key
that's
phrase
fair.
here.
I think they'd love that.
They're doing homage to Goodfellas, but in doing so, instead of it being drugs or something, it's chicken fingers. Like that's the whole episode, right? It's just them, creating an empire, like a criminal empire around chicken fingers. It's such a good show. I mean, and the thing is, there's so many episodes, but also like, there's some stuff I can't show my son yet or whatever. He's still too young, but like back to the 2-part episode, a fistful of paintballs and a few more paintballs. So damn good. Like even like the references inside of there, like, oh, we're not doing the Old West reference anymore. Now we're doing more of like a Star Wars motif. Like they reference it in the episode. Abed decides that he wants to be the Han Solo character. Like just all of that stuff. It's so well done. It's so fun.
And there's so many Easter eggs. Like in Arrested Development, they keep shows going. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't remember when it starts, but the Beetlejuice thing, how if you say Beetlejuice,
that is the most famous one, is the Beetlejuice one.
The most famous Beetlejuice.
Which
so
they
good.
say Beetlejuice 3 times across multiple seasons even. And the 3rd time they say the word Beetlejuice walks in the background.
So good.
But that's the thing. There's like so much attention to detail and all that kind of stuff here that it's a lot of fun. But now I will say the sad part here is we lose Donald Glover after what season is it? After season, he does a little bit like the first few episodes of season 5, right? Did I get that right?
I don't remember. Probably,
Yeah.
because I didn't finish season 6. I've watched it here and there on YouTube. Whatever I can get for free, baby. That's how I watched it.
He's only in the first 5 episodes of season 5 of a 13-episode season. His last episode is an episode called Geothermal Escapism, which, you know, Donald Glover is leaving the show. It's his final episode, you know, and everyone's sad to see him go and stuff. So everyone starts just, you know, it devolves into a Road Fury or like a Mad Max kind of motif, if you will.
Yeah.
In that. And then, so you have him, he leaves the show. Chevy Chase had already left the show. Jonathan Banks came in to sort of pseudo replace that spot, that seat in the chair in the study room for that season. Yvette Nicole Brown leaves the show at some point too.
Yeah.
And then by season 6, it's a very different cast. You still have Joel McHale. You have Jillian Jacobs is still Britta. Danny Pudi is still there as Abed. Allison Brie is still there. And you have Jim Rash, who's Dean Pelton. And you have Ken Jeong, who is Ben Chang. But then you also have Keith David, who is pretty much the voice of like A&E documentaries and stuff and 80s action star. Like, I love Keith David, who plays Elroy, who's the sort of sit-in or at least sits in the chair of where Chevy Chase sat.
Yeah.
And then Paget Brewster, who is a very different character, but sort of takes the Yvette Nicole Brown chair in the study room. So by the final season, we've turned over. They never try to replace Donald Glover, but we have other replacements in the cast, if you will. And Ken Jeong gets kind of promoted to hang out with them a little bit more. And so, and I will say, season 6 for a show that wasn't on network television is still well produced, really good. There's a really fun episode, like a few fun episodes in there. It's just a good show. It keeps going. It's great. I love it.
One of my other favorite lines is my friend and I used to say to each other all the time, if we would like watch a movie and be like, I'm not really understanding what's going on. She'd be like, I didn't get Inception. Like, Troy. I'm like, I get it, man. I didn't get Inception either. Obviously, we got Inception, but it's just a line that Troy says. And it's just so fucking funny. And it's one of those things that, you know, the pop culture lines, people that have watched it definitely have the things that are quite quotable. Like before, when it's like, I thought you went to Columbia and now I have to get a degree from America.
Yeah. And now we need one from America. Yeah.
It's so
And that was
good.
just the first episode. How many times have you ever used the phrase streets ahead?
Oh my God. And I know that we've kind of, you touched on it, but like the way that Abed is obsessed with TV, he shits on TV. His character shits on TV and like takes jabs at the way that TV is actually produced and the way that like TV producers and networks create TV so many times during the show. And I love not only that it was aired and they didn't make him get out, but like the one note that I have from the funniest quotes, Abed says, TV rules aren't based on common sense. They're based on the studio wanting to milk their profits dry. And he just gets away with it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not usually allowed.
I will say too, one of my favorite episodes as far as him going down the rabbit hole of just, him being him is when he takes the class, Who's the Boss? Which, by the way, Stephen Tobolowsky is the professor in that class, which I forget where I heard this anecdote, but I'm going to share it here.
Okay.
Stephen
I'm ready.
Tobolowsky, who he's been in so many things, by the way. Love him. He was Ned Ryerson in Groundhog's Day.
Yep.
Or Groundhog Day, right? Right. Okay, I got that right. So I remember
Day. Yes.
Groundhog Day. Yes, to be clear. Sorry about that. And I can't get his face out of my head anymore because to promote that episode that we did for this podcast on our TikTok and Instagram, that like I had a rap made of.
It was so good.
The Ned Ryerson rap. I love that. We should have actually used it in the episode. I don't know why we didn't. But anyway, they hired him to do that show, but he apparently had like some procedure, like he had like a bypass surgery or something. He was not fully well. And I forget where he said it. Maybe it was like a Reddit AMA or something, but he did talk about how he loved working on the show. He wasn't like, he couldn't even walk around. So like all the scenes of him in it are him just sitting in a chair, which you look back and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even realize that was the case. But it was all because he couldn't even walk. And they were just like, hey, we'll walk around you. Like they wanted him for the show. They loved him. They expressed like they love him as an actor and they didn't want to miss this opportunity. And so if he was willing to do it, they'll do whatever they can to make him comfortable. And he said they absolutely were. He was grateful for the opportunity. And he's the one that Abed drives insane by being like, his life study on who's the boss. Is it Angela or is it Tony or is it, Mona? Who knows? And
so
Abed's like, it's
fucking good.
It's Tony. It's
Tony.
And here's why. And then breaks it down and then breaks his heart. And then at the end, my favorite joke out of that too is at the end, he's just like depressed and like his life's work down the drain because of Abed. And then he opens the drawer and there's a book called What Was Happening? The stories behind what's happening. And he's like, okay, and that's like this where he leaves off. So we know he's okay now.
Oh my God.
But yeah, Streets Ahead is one of my favorite. I mean, Ben Chang, there's what was it? He's like a matchbook or something. Like he's reading something off like a matchbook. There's an episode of like the neo-noir episode where he's kind of starting to go crazy.
Oh my God.
And he's like, it's a Palomino. It's like, no, it's like Matchbox. It's Matchbox backwards. It's a Palomino.
It's a Palomino.
Yeah. Just weird stuff like that. And then that's the thing too, is you can almost, I mentioned The Office and how that show kind of like with Ed Helms, like just tried to play up his craziness. And then they try to just turn him into the new Michael Scott at some point too. Mm-hmm. This show, Ben Chang, that character just goes wacky and crazy, and they just like let him go bonkers for a while.
Completely nuts.
It's fun. Right. And it's hilarious. And it's all because the study group drives everyone insane. He wants to be a part of the study group. He can't be, so it drives him insane. It's just, it's all great. Oh, you know who else pops up? There's a name you didn't mention in there. Betty White shows up in this show too.
Betty White and Hilary Duff.
Oh, that's right. Hilary Duff's one of the mean girls.
Hilary Duff.
Yeah.
She is a mean girl. Oh, girl. Betty White. My friend has a white boxer named Betty White. She's so cute.
Yeah. But anyway, so go watch the show. It's great.
Please go watch the show. It's, it's a very good palate cleanser, and it's definitely one of those shows. I know that we always tell people like, oh, this is going to be dark. This is going to be deep. You have to pay attention. I recommend watching it when you can pay attention because it is very similar in that of other shows that we've talked about where there's so many jokes in every line and there's so many callbacks to like other episodes and other jokes. So I recommend that. But the humor is mindless, but also very intelligent. I don't know how you would, you know what I mean? Like you can just laugh to laugh, but then you can also laugh at really complex, intelligent humor. Yeah. Which I think is kind of hard to do both. And they do.
It's all from the mind of Dan Harmon, which I feel like depending on the age group you're in, you might just be like, oh, that's the Rick and Morty guy and not be interested. Or you're like, oh, that's the Rick and Morty guy. I'm interested. And either way, just set aside expectations. It's smartly written. That's the part of Dan Harmon that I recommend here. And by the way, it has a fun, catchy, seemingly upbeat theme song that is just actually depressing if you actually take a minute to like read the lyrics or hear the lyrics.
I didn't mention it. My favorite fun fact is Dan Harmon, when he was writing these characters, he was trying to be really respectful of the fact that people were going to say that Abed was on the autism spectrum. Yeah. And in writing and researching about autism, because he wanted to be true, if people are going to infer that, let me be true to that and be mindful. Yeah. And he realized that he himself is on the spectrum when writing Abed's character.
What?
And
really?
The diagnosis of autism. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He didn't realize he was autistic until he was writing Abed's character, and he said it was like really therapeutic and all these things that he thought were like, he'd gotten shit on for his whole life for being weird and like the way that he poured that into Abed and realized that he himself was autistic. That's like my favorite fun fact. So heartwarming.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Dan Harmon's one of those people too that I respect immensely. The quality of the content and his dedication to the way he writes episodes and his concepts behind writing and all that stuff is really amazing. And he's super dedicated. But I've also heard stories of like working for him is a nightmare, which for someone like that, who is like that dedicated and like, this is like such a perfectionist. And that was the thing too, is the bickering back and forth beyond Chevy Chase was also like issues he had with NBC, because he was also just like running up to the last minute. Everything had to be perfect. And like, so like episodes weren't even submitted to the network, like in time, almost ever. But they do touch on, it is funny. They touch on a few times, like Abed is this character and the way they approach him with love and care. It's the first episode where, Abed said something and says something to him. And then Jeff responds, oh, well, you have Asperger's, and everyone's like, oh, like that's so mean. But then they are extremely protective of Abed the rest of the series. And, and he really is sort of the main character. It kind of becomes that if you, unintentionally or intentionally, or maybe, I don't know, but such a great show, such great characters.
It's a great show.
Yeah. And also to connect the dots, because from the world of It's Always Sunny to the world of Community, you have the other show that Danny Pudi is in, not, to be clear, not DuckTales. He's on Mythic Quest.
Which I have to watch. I have to watch it.
Yeah.
We've talked about it so many times. I have to watch it. I would love it.
And what's funny about it too is he's a very different character. He's not Abed, which and obviously clearly he's not Abed, but like I think I was almost afraid going in like, oh, okay, is he just going to be playing Abed? But no, he's playing a little bit of a dick. He's playing a very different character, but in a very good way. But it's just good to see. And honestly, it's one of those things too, is like anytime the cast of Community pops up in something, it's one of those things like, and I think this is, I don't get this as much with shows like The Office. Like you do, but like Steve Carell, and everyone from that show has gone on to do bigger and better things. But it almost feels underdogish when you see, Joel McHale or Jillian Jacobs or Danny Pudi or even Yvette Nicole Brown like pop up in other things. You're like, oh yeah, we grew up together. We went to college together, kind of it gives you that kind of vibe.
That's why I watched Love on Netflix, because I was like, Jillian's like, I'm going to watch this. And it was so good. I highly recommend if you just want like a very easy palate cleanser. I think it's only 2 seasons.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, I have one weird story to share.
Okay.
And I don't know if I ever shared it with you personally, or I don't think it was ever on this podcast, but Donald Glover, who, again, I loved Donald Glover.
Childish Gambino. Yes.
Childish Gambino himself, which is, so when I was working in radio, national radio, I was sitting at my desk and my desk was like on like the main floor of like all these other desks for all these other people who worked there. All of a sudden, here comes Childish Gambino, Donald Glover, walking towards me. And like, I just sort of turned and like, have you ever met anyone famous or like crossed paths with them? Like, not like, okay, I'm at a concert. Clearly that's whatever person I came to see.
Yes.
But like, have you ever like...
Yeah, the town I live in is riddled with them.
Okay, yeah. You ever just like lock eye contact because your brain is like, oh, familiar face. And normally you're just like, oh, familiar face. Oh, hey, Joe, like whatever. But like when you lock eyes with a famous person, sometimes, depending on the situation, your brain's like familiar person. Like, but it's like, oh, no, familiar for a different reason. You don't personally know them. And so
you can't say hi. Hi, Troy.
Right. Right. And so
hi,
I
Childish.
And I locked eyes with him, and he was with a group of people all walking down to one of the studios. And like I turned my head and he caught my eye and I caught his eye, and then my brain kind of froze for a minute. And then he got to my desk, like right next to me, and I go, oh, hey. And what's funny is we had celebrities kind of coming in every single day, right? It wasn't anything new or anything. And I always keep an eye out because I obviously had to do interviews with people, and I would just always like check the list every day, even if I didn't have anyone I knew I had to talk to. Just interesting because every once in a while, and this is getting deep, but like sometimes I'd have to be like, oh, that person is not on my schedule to interview, but I should interview them because of reason, right? Or if I just like, I'm a big fan, so I'm going to figure out a way to interview them. And so I just go, oh, hey. And he goes, hey, what's up? And I was like, oh, I didn't know you were coming in today. Now, in my brain, I'm saying that because he wasn't on the list of guests coming in for the day, so I didn't know he was coming in. But now I've entered a conversation on line 3 of this dialogue that I'm just like, yeah, clearly we know each other, right? Like, oh, I didn't know you were coming in today.
Oh,
like,
yeah, my boy.
And he goes, oh yeah, it was like last minute. Now this, by the way, for context, is the point in like the Childish Gambino, like, and I didn't understand this till way later, that like when he was doing Childish Gambino and he was doing albums, he would immerse himself in characters per album that he did, right? There was like different like pseudo personas he would put on. And this is the one from, maybe it was Camp that he did, where he had like the Kyle from South Park hat, with the ear flaps, right? And he just, and so he's wearing that brown, I forget what those hats are called. And he's just stoned out of his mind.
I call it an Elmer Fudd hat.
Yeah, okay, like the Elmer Fudd hat. And by the way, the rest of his team and everybody he was with kept walking. So now it's just me and Donald Glover, and I'm sitting in a chair and I'm looking up at him, and he's stoned off his ass. I think he also thinks that he's supposed to know me because of the way I spoke to him. And
so
I was
he's just going with it.
Yeah, and so I think I had a conversation with him for like a couple seconds, but now I'm getting nervous because I'm like, oh shit, now people are going to think that I held him up, and I turn around and his entire team left. And I was like, oh, I don't want to hold you up. He was like, oh, it's all good. And then he was like, yeah, I'll see you later. And then just kept walking. And so that was like my, 90-second hangout with Donald Glover back in whatever year that was. It had to be like 2014, maybe 2015. I don't know. But it was post Community at that point too. And I'm like, oh, if I knew he was coming in, I would have like held him down and asked him all the questions about his career and Community and all those things. But never got to.
Do you think there was a moment when he got back to his team? He was like, yo, do I know that guy?
Yeah.
You guys know that guy? Who knows that guy?
That
guy definitely knows me.
I do wonder sometimes. I'm like, if I go back and if I watch like Atlanta, which is sort of a parody on like the music industry and like, just like, or not parody, that's the wrong word, but like takedown, if you will. Is that a better word? Like takedown of the industry?
Yeah, more fair, of course.
Where I'm just like, oh man, is there a character in there? He's like, remember when I walk through and there's that random dude who hung on to me? Dude.
Yeah, I've definitely done that, especially in our grocery store, which is 5 inches big and only open for 13 minutes. And they close at 7 minutes early of the 13 minutes. I did that with Amber Tamblyn.
Yeah.
She was like, is that a good beer?
Did you lock eyes and say hello? Or like, how did that work?
I just said hi. I don't know why. I just was like, oh, hey. She's like, hi. Yeah. And I was carrying like a case of beer. She's like, is that a good one? I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. She was like, oh, awesome. Have a good weekend. I was like, you too. And in my head, I was like, what the fuck are you doing? You idiot.
You know what's funny is for my career where I was around, like I spent a lot of time around random celebrities because again, they would all come through and it was people from the world of music and entertainment and sports. It was only him I did that with. And then the only other person I did that with, and it was weird because I was inside of a glass studio and my brain locked onto him and then he locked eye contact with me and we just watched each other like uncomfortably, like that scene in It's Always Sunny where like they're just looking at each other across the room. Was with Ira Glass, who's the host from This American Life.
I love Ira Glass. I would have done the same. Face doesn't match the voice, and I love it.
What was great about it too is like I was just like I think my brain locked because I'm like I know who he is, but he's not like such a famous person where everyone knows him. So like my brain is like ruffling through the file cabinet trying to figure out like how do I know this person's face? We know them from somewhere. Come on, quick, look. And then by the time I did, I was like, oh my God, I've been staring at Ira Glass through the glass.
Oh.
For way too long. And it made me
I have very embarrassing stories like that. Like mortifying.
Yeah.
Like if I tell them my face gets red. I think I've told it once on here, but in this small town that I live, there's a bar that has like, they're known across the state for how good their chicken wings are. And we're friends with the owner and we go there all the time. And David Cross and Amber Tamblyn, again, were sitting there. And it was when they first moved to the town. And I'm, as we've mentioned, and we will do, Mr. Show, big fan, big fan. And huge fan of Amber Tamblyn on House. And I was like, oh my God, my sisters, my mom and I, we love House. I was like, I got to send a picture to my sisters.
Yeah.
It's very dark in this bar. There is no lighting. Yeah. The lights are off. Only the sports televisions are live. Yeah. My iPhone at the time, it's like an iPhone 4, must have had automatic flash on. So in this very dark bar, my flash goes off. I throw my phone on the ground like I don't own it. Like I don't know where that came from. That's not my phone. Throw it on the phone or on the ground. Everyone looks. My fiance looks at me at the time like I just shit on his face. Like he's never been so disgusted and embarrassed to be with me in his life. Even now, look at my cheeks are getting red, and I don't get embarrassed.
Yeah.
Okay. I do not get embarrassed. Yeah. It was so mortifying. I was like, we got our food and I was like, we've got to go. Pack it up to go. Yeah. I can't be here anymore. I cannot be here anymore. It was just like us and like 3 other people in there other than them.
Yeah.
That's one of mine.
You think in hindsight now that when you like said hi to her at the supermarket, she's like, that's the bitch who was taking photos of us.
Because further on, like a couple months after that, I sat at the bar at the same place next to David Cross and was joking with him, and we were talking about baseball, and I was shitting on him and making fun of him, and I made him laugh, and he said I was funny. So I just put it into a neat little bow, and I was like, I'm gonna diddle my box to that for 20 years plus. Yeah, that's how that happened. But yeah. Yep. Oh, that's just one of many stories. We'll sprinkle them in because there's many. And I'm not a star fucker. I do not like, if you're a famous person, that's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
But I don't. And I really fucked up there. So that's how we're gonna end that episode.
That's the thing too, is even in my career too, like I think there's an expectation where it's like, oh, people are the only person I was ever starstruck by was like David Cross. I'm sorry, Bob Odenkirk. Bob Odenkirk.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know if I can handle that.
Yeah.
Overload.
I'm sure more stories will percolate through my brain too.
I'm going to save mine because I've got some really good ones. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was fun. Everybody go watch Community.
Go watch Community. Thanks for hanging out with us, and see you next time. Bye.
Yeah, bye.